All right. All right. Welcome to Consensus, everyone. I'm Jerry Cuomo. I'm the Vice President of Blockchain Technologies at IBM. And this has now become somewhat of a bit of a tradition at Consensus. So it's our pleasure to take you through our strategy. And I have some esteemed colleagues here that are going to share their bit of the IBM blockchain strategy. So one of the things that we're really trying, and I think having some success in IBM, is really thinking of what I think many people call a growth attitude. And a good growth attitude is a group that can actually seeks feedback. Right? So I have to start this session off with a question, and I'd like your feedback. It's a burning question, because here we are, many of us, year 4 of blockchain on their blockchain journey. So I have a pivotal question that I'd like you to think about as we go along, and I dearly need your feedback. And the question is if IBM Blockchain were a Marvel character, which one would we be and why? Right, this has really been on my mind lately, so I need your feedback on this. So think about it, and maybe some thoughts. And I'm just reading sometimes when I read the press or I hear from some of our competition, some of you may unfortunately say that IBM is the evil Thanos. Anyone out there that comes to mind? John Wolpert's raising his hand. That's not fair. Can't be. No, we're not the bully of blockchain. So who's next? This one I like, Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, I think, really represents the spirit of taking care of the universe and being a bit selfless. So I kind of identify with this one, but this is your input. I'm just seeding the conversation. Am I getting warmer? Captain Marvel fans, IBM? Okay, one. All right, next. All right, Iron Man. Bringing good tech to solve tough problems. Any votes for Iron Man? Of course, you can do your write-in votes, too. There's a few characters. I don't know, how many have you seen the latest Endgame? All right, I'm not surprised, this audience, a few Marvel fans out there. I like the balanced Hulk. This is kind of, you have the bulk of Hulk, but the brains of Bruce. So does anyone see IBM in the new Hulk? Yes, yeah, okay. No, but whom did you select? Anyone come to mind? Shout it out. Just give me one and I'll continue, I promise. Iron Man, okay. Anyone else? One more, shout it out. Another Iron Man. Loki. Thor. Okay. Groot? All right. No, thank you. So just a little fun. I do think this is we've created quite the Marvel universe here within blockchain. So a little bit inspired. So let's get going. I want to start off with just a little warm up, and then I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues to talk a bit about IBM blockchain strategy. Okay? And very simply put, IBM blockchain strategy has 3 pillars: services, platform, and solutions. And I will say I am so grateful to be part of IBM during this blockchain renaissance, because our fearless leader, Ginny Rometty, is all in. I mean, she is our biggest fan and could be our biggest critic, too, from time to time. And I think this all-in strategy is quite effective in that these pillars help gel and inform each other in a very, I think, symbiotic way, but in a way that keeps us grounded in the whole. It's much better to, you can't get fit by going and reading books on fitness, although I'm going to be pushing a book on blockchain in a few minutes, so maybe don't take that one too literally. But the point is that with practitioners across each of these pillars, we get a lot of feedback from customers coming in from different angles, which makes it kind of self-reinforcing, but in some cases, uh-oh, time to pivot. Right? Maybe the market isn't responding this way. And maybe a quick overview, because the panelists here are going to go through each of these. And services really are about our custom consulting, discovery, right through delivery services. We've exchanged at least $1 with over 500 projects and some notables, but I can go on listing 500 or 497 of these. We trade pretty foundational in trade finance media ocean, which I saw a demo of a couple days ago. They've been live for a few months now. Really taking on, when you spend $100 million on advertising, I am shocked to know that in this modern world, you really don't know how that $10 million or $100 million of advertisement is actually being allocated and spent. Right? But with this business blockchain that Media Ocean has helped convene, there is now full visibility and accountability across that supply chain of spend, so that in any given second, you could find out exactly where you stand against the drawdown on that. And CLS, who's not too far from here in New Jersey, with their foreign currency exchange blockchain, just to name a handful. Right? So the services really are what it's about. And you can debate all day whether blockchain for business is really a blockchain. And I'm really tired and bored of that conversation, because if you ask the 500 plus, they know why they're doing blockchain. It's about the value that they're deriving from the system. You can debate all day whether permission, permissionless, and everything in between makes sense. Is it going to happen? Might it happen? Keep debating, because there are at least 500 folks that are off to the races. And I think based on some of the faces I've seen in the room, some of you are part of that group, so thank you for that. Next is platform, a topic near and dear to my heart, because that's one of the pillars that I am responsible for, or the pillar that I'm responsible for. And this is about, maybe you've gone through our garage, engaged IBM services, and now it's really time to start making your blockchain vision come to reality via code. And that's what the platform is about. There's a set of services to allow you to build, operate, govern, grow on any cloud, public or private. This is fueled by the Hyperledger Fabric, the industry's first, but not only, permission blockchain that is built on a true open governance model. We've achieved something pretty fundamental that Gary will be talking about, in the sense that, like Java back in the early 2000s, with Hyperledger, this cooperation does something pretty amazing. It drives innovation through the roof. It drives through modular design. It drives quality, especially around security, in record time, because you have the IQ of the group pointed at this technology base. But because of the fierce collaboration, there's also fierce competition. Now Fabric is part of about 7 or 8 blockchain as a service offerings. When Amazon lowers their price on enterprise blockchain with Fabric, we have to look at it too and say, okay, does the value that we bring to the table, keep our price steady, or do we have to adjust accordingly? So that fierce competition drives innovation, and that innovation drives quality. Risk goes down, price goes down, adoption goes up. 1,300 total networks running today. This morning I checked on the IBM Blockchain Network, and about 10% of those networks are what I would call live production networks. These are consortia that you will hear about later, but I mentioned a few of them before, and I think I have a slide on that too. And last but not solutions. But really, to balance this out, IBM is investing in ventures and co-creating with industry leaders blockchain networks. So we're doing our share, not just to be arms providers, but also participating in the creation of this value. And we've picked these 4 to start: Food Trust, TradeLens, World Wire, and our Trusted Identity networks. And you'll see our panelists going. And I think together, this strategy's greatest natural resource are the 100+ networks. So what is a live blockchain consortia network? It's a network that has multiple organizations participating with smart contracts deployed and that are regularly transacting on a daily basis, right? And this is just some examples across various industries. So IBM Blockchain, powered by Hyperledger, driven by our services and the insight that we're getting from our custom solutions, are leading to this kind of groundswell of adoption, not just within IBM, but also driving an industry around our capabilities. So we're going to walk through these 3 pillars here in the following order. Eileen is going to talk about our services pillar. Then I have Gary Singh that's going to talk about our platform pillar. Then I have Adam and Nitin that are going to talk about our solutions pillar. And the 2 solutions they're going to talk about, I think, are the ones that are most broadly applicable perhaps to this audience. There are horizontal solutions around payments and identity. We have some verticals across food and trade, but today they're going to talk about these, all right? And also across all of this, we have a booth that's cooking downstairs. I saw it and I was like, whoa, when I got off the elevator, it's right there front and center, and we'd be glad to meet up with you and chat about any of these topics. So without further ado, Eileen Lowry.
All right. So I have one question as well, not so much about what comic character you are, because I personally don't know the comics very well, so I'm going to say I'm Wonder Woman. However, who here is on the beginning of their blockchain journey? Yes. Oh, only okay. A couple hands. That's great to see, because that means that you are already actively doing something with blockchain, which means that you have gone through a bit of this journey already. And what gets me very excited is actually to talk more so about the pilot and production opportunities and really that prescriptive approach that IBM has been taking. A bit of what you heard from Jerry already, but more so even more prescriptively, because you read about and hear about a lot of these things being in pilot or being in production, what does that really mean? What are we doing to work with our clients? So for those that did raise their hand and they're a little bit on the earlier side of their journey, what is it that we're doing with our clients to really set them up for success? And that really starts with discovery. Hopefully, again, for many of you, this is not year 1 of blockchain for the enterprise and for business. But if it is, it's really about discovering what are those use cases that make sense because of the business problems that you have. Not a technology looking for a problem anymore. What are those business problems that you have, those use cases that make sense because blockchain has been proven to help provide value for your business and your business ecosystem. Quickly getting through that to prioritize and getting into what we call design thinking. And you're going to hear more about design thinking in a minute and what we do with our clients there. From there, we want to really take you into that immersive 2 days, get you excited about your use case, and bring in your ecosystem members to really get to then not only just talking the talk, but walking the walk and actually building your blockchain-based solution. Getting together your ecosystem participants, understanding what are the problems that they have when you're throwing data over the wall to them, and really understanding what does that interaction look like. Getting through that first project, again, not just from a minimal viable product standpoint, but with that minimal viable ecosystem. That all encompassing should take just a couple months. We want to really accelerate you into that pilot and production phase, which is really where the rubber hits the road, because we're not just talking about bits and pieces of proving the business and, of course, the technology doing what it already does, but really now setting yourself up for success when it comes to what are the business-related activities for the governance setup, what are the actual legal entity or regulatory compliance things that we need to think about more seriously than just knowing that it's there out there and we need to solve for it, but really getting down to the nitty-gritty of what is it that we need to do to ensure that we are compliant or that we are helping driving compliance with that ecosystem. Making sure that we are then moving you along into production to get those integrations into your systems of records, bringing on different members and other players into the ecosystem, onboarding them into that network so that you are truly transacting with real transactions, real dollars, real data, real goods, so that we are moving from, again, that pilot and POC phase to true production grade systems. And I've had the honor of doing that day in and day out with many different clients and many different industries, as Jerry showed, which I want to talk about a few of those. First is AAIS. This is a client that we've been working with for a little over a year in the insurance space. They're the only non-for-profit advisory group based in the US. And what we started on a journey last year, just about this time, was with design thinking. Helping them, they were looking at how can they really reinvent statistical reporting for insurance carriers and regulators, making sure that the insurance carriers are compliant. We did a design thinking workshop with insurance carriers and regulators, so not just them in a vacuum, because again, they want to reinvent the industry. Got together, did a quick 6-week minimal viable product build that they then showed off at a conference last year in August. They wanted to really rally the industry around this new way of doing statistical reporting. That led to basically a partnership between IBM and AAIS, where we've done quarterly design thinking workshops and quarterly release cycles so that we're constantly getting the feedback of the insurance carriers and regulators so that it is not just we go build a hamburger and we find out that you're a vegetarian and you can't eat that and you don't want that. Right? Really getting that industry feedback to make sure that as we're progressing through with this piece of work that it is for the industry and that is going to be adopted. That continues to be an ongoing set of work, 1 year's worth of work. If you circle back 3 years, that's probably, many of the projects that started 3 years ago are at the same point of where they are today. So a lot of exciting work there. The second is a consortium out of Thailand, the Banking Community Initiative. It is now over 20 banks and 7 different corporations focused on bank guarantees, making sure that the guarantees that used to take days now can be done in seconds. They also started their journey in 2016 doing a quick minimal viable product with one single bank, Kazakhstan Bank. They realized the power of blockchain and that ecosystem, quickly found their fellow members of corporates and banks that they transact with day in and day out, brought them together, formed the Banking Community Initiative last year, and are now in production with those 20 banks and those 7 different corporations, and continue to look at how can they expand outside of just the Thailand region. And last but not least, one near and dear to my heart that just announced last week is a piece of work that we're doing in the telco space with Syniverse. If you ever go outside your own country and you're using your cell phone and you're roaming with your data, that, of course, with your home carrier, because we're not all on the same carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. If you're going abroad, you might be roaming on Orange or Vodafone. So you're allowed to use your phone. You as a consumer don't really care, but someone has to actually clear and settle that data and that dollar amount exchanged so that you can just easily use your phone. Last year, we did a design thinking workshop with them in Munich, got them started on their journey, did a quick MVP build, which led to a pilot with Orange and MTS in Russia, so that we could truly see that the clearing and settlement between these carriers could happen, which normally takes a full cycle, a month, right? You get your cell phone bill monthly, that you could now clear and settle in 15 days and make sure that, if there were discrepancies, that the 2 carriers could do that much more quickly with fewer disputes and really reduce that friction that happens. We're now moving forward and continue to work with them to really launch this into a production space with many, many carriers. So just a few quick examples of that journey that we see day in and day out with our customers and how we're working with them. I've covered a lot of these. That was a lot of focus on kind of the design and build phase of what we can help you with from a services perspective. But I want to spend a few minutes really on the deploy and scaling your blockchain solutions. You're going to hear in a few minutes from Gary, who's really going to talk about the IBM blockchain platform and the ability to deploy anywhere. But what we can help you with in that case is, it is very simple in the IBM Cloud to get up and started very quickly. But as I just talked about with many of the examples, you're talking about bringing ecosystems of people together. They're not all going to be on the same cloud. They're not all going to be, as I said, you're not all on Verizon. You're not all on AT&T. So there needs to be this ability to be able to connect it together. And what we can help you with is that quick and easy jump start, the quick start. But you may actually need to truly plan out, what is the topology of my blockchain network going to look like? And we can help you with that and really get you started, get you not only started, but further along in that journey much faster, because you're thinking about where all these different nodes are going to be running and how are they going to communicate and ensure that, again, you're compliant, particularly when it comes to where data residency needs to be. And last but not least, we recognize that many of you didn't raise your hand as far as you're in the beginning of your journey. You've already been on your journey. But many people like to get make sure that they are really architecting their solution appropriately and correctly. And they need a little bit of help and reassurance on how they're doing that. And that's where we can help you with scaling your blockchain solution. Do a quick health check. See that how you have architected your solution or how you're planning on deploying your solution makes sense, and really leverage our expertise and that we've done with those 500 client engagements to make sure you're setting yourself up for success. And that's where we can help you with the health check and a performance assessment. Fine-tune your channels, fine-tune your endorsement policies to change that a couple hundred TPS to a couple thousand TPS. And that's what gets me really excited every day, is not just to be in the design and build phase, but really help you optimize your deploying and your scaling of your solutions. So if this has been intriguing and interesting to you, Jerry already talked about the fact that our booth is just downstairs right when you walk in. We're actually hosting 30-minute design thinking workshops. Very short, sweet, getting to the point around the different areas here, from financial services and payments to supply chain, media, and identity, all downstairs, quick little sessions. If you have a use case, bring that with you. We'll help distill that down. If you don't have a use case, we've got our experts downstairs. We'll help you pull out and tease those business problems that you have and really advance you in your thinking, leave you with some really interesting ideas and ways to implement your solution. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Gary.
So where's the green forward? All right. Great, thanks, Eileen. So I'm going to try to whip through this in about 8 minutes and 45 seconds here on the overall blockchain platform. So I thought I'd start out with why Hyperledger Fabric. I guess my comical joke would be why not Hyperledger Fabric, but I think we started out building why did we start Hyperledger Fabric in the first place? Still actually holds true, right? We said this about 2.5, 3, I don't even remember how many years ago when we did. 3.5 years ago. Time flies pretty fast, right? When we went to look at the requirements around blockchain and really any technology that anybody's going to run, right? These principles still hold true, right? Accountability. You have to know who people are and who's running the nodes on your technology. I'm sorry, people are going to tell you that you don't have to know that. Until the world changes in the next 50 to 100 years, you want some level of accountability. I certainly don't want a node in Russia just randomly running my transactions, no matter if they're in zero knowledge or secret or whatever, right? It's not going to fly, right? I don't see how it's going to pass the regulators. Honestly, me as a citizen, I'm not going to do that, right? And you can't try to take, we used to say this, you can't take, who's built systems, in a software system, right? And you built a great prototype, and then you go and try to get it deployed, and they're like, hey, did you do criteria X, Y, Z? You're like, no, no, no. Usually they're involved in security. If you don't actually design this type of security model in mind from the beginning, you're just not going to get there. I'm sorry, retrofitting stuff doesn't work. So having that level of accountability still is key. We also realized, this is going to sound like a partially controversial line, many people will say they want blockchain, but you really don't want all the power of blockchain. And what do I mean by that? Privacy. Like, hey, blockchain's great, fully transparent. We can see everything everywhere, all these random nodes on the network. And you come and say, well, actually, no, I only want to share data with these few people. I don't want everybody seeing it. I don't want smart contracts running everywhere. I don't want my logic everywhere, right? So there has to be some type of intermediate, how do we bridge that gap? I think that we've done an often overlooked thing on Fabric or any technology in that space was the ability to kind of bridge that gap. And people can pick on how we've done it, but we've tried to make it so that you can pick the nodes, know who the nodes are, know what smart contracts you want running on what nodes, what ledgers people want to be part of, right? Kind of dividing up and sharding and partitioning the network, right? But still being able to work. That's a level of privacy in there, right? From the scalability perspective, this is an interesting one. Again, I'll be a little controversial. There are computer science problems that no one can actually make to solve. Anybody who wants to tell you they're going to get 1 million transactions per second on a network distributed across the world is flat out lying to you. The laws of physics don't allow this, right? They just don't allow it, right? So how do you take a network, right? What's Ethereum doing today? Well, they finally figured out that you can't run transactions on every single node across every single thing in the network and expect to get high throughput. So now everyone's going to go to sharding or breaking it apart. So we considered all of those things when we designed Fabric in the first place, right? How do we separate out a set of nodes to provide ordering? right? That's one key service, right? Separation of duties. How do we scale out to large volumes, right? So again, just looking at those types of models are just classic sorts of distributed computing. The last piece really is on the security side, right? This kind of goes back to accountability, but again, can I go back and figure out where a problem actually happened in the network, right? We know how to do this, right? If I know who the nodes are, you're typically not going to do business with people you don't know, right? And we can have those types of agreements. So we really built all that in mind. So I guess when you kind of look at, there's a thing on here that says, I'm not going to bash, other products, right? I think enough people out here do bashing. I think there's lots of great ideas that are out there. My thing is on something like a quorum, which we hear more and more about. If you don't own all of the technology, I don't know how you can actually develop it, right? Currently, quorum's mostly based on modifying core Ethereum, which is not actually, there's no incentive in that for the people defining Geth or whatever to actually break apart the network. So I think that there's some good ideas in quorum, but I think inherently, right, it can't meet these properties because they don't own all the code base and being able to build it up from the ground up. On the Corda side, I actually think that Corda is appropriate for some specific use cases, right? I think Corda decided to build a specific peer-to-peer type system. They do that very well, right? I think Fabric's difference is we tried to bridge that gap between having a broadcast-based system where I can actually have a network where I do want to share between more than like one party and not just passing it from one party to a time, but where there may be more members in the network, as well as trying to combine that with a similar model where you could actually go down to a model that's only two parties, right, and then sharing that data. So I think it's slightly different philosophies. I think that Fabric, we've tried to at least support multiple models moving forward. All right. So the other question people often get is, why a platform? Why do companies produce software platforms? My easy analogy for people is, so Linux is open source, right? How many people here actually run Linux? How many of you actually build your own kernel, build your own bootloader? Yeah, there's always like one or two of them in there, right? I love you. But your companies typically have a contract with either Red Hat or Canonical, right? Somebody who can build a certified distribution, make it to scale, build the tools around it, right? Even partially just for indemnification for you providing that software, right? So while we want to have Fabric out there and every single thing from an IBM perspective, right? Fabric is part of Hyperledger. There's nothing that we do to Fabric, just so people know, this is an important point. Everything that's in Fabric, even in the IBM platform that uses Fabric, is in open source. Anybody is perfectly capable of taking that. As a matter of fact, I'm actually flattered, and of course it causes us trouble, that we have AWS, Oracle, Azure, Alibaba, you name it, right? Blockdaemon. I'm probably just giving away my competition here, but they're all running Fabric, right? They all take Fabric, build platforms and tools around that, right? So that's a great thing on the open side. Why do you actually want to look at it? Because there are things that we can help to make easier for you to streamline your business, get on the value. If you want to take it and run it yourself, that's fantastic, right? But it's the same reason why you look at traditionally building your own sort of software, right? So what have we tried to do quickly on the IBM blockchain platform perspective, right? So we're solely based on the underlying technology, it's Hyperledger Fabric. As I said, I just will reiterate this point. We do not mutate, modify, or put any secret sauce into Fabric. We run vanilla Hyperledger Fabric. The key things, clearly we're core developers on Fabric, so that helps a lot, right? If issues come in, we can fix that. We can take business requirements, we can drive them into the platform. We've heard the list of clients. We've recently been focusing on making tons of development tools, right, to make this easier. How do we make processes around governance, setting up nodes, setting up the rules? For those of you who don't know Fabric, there are some complexities in Fabric in turning out who's allowed to validate or endorse a contract. I mean, we give you so much flexibility in there, it can become complicated. Building tools around that is important. The other side is, when you look at it from a cloud perspective or operations perspective, we have the expertise to actually know how to build and run these things, right? Taking that, taking that out of their hands, and you can focus on your applications. Just quickly, and these you can stop by the booth. We really focus on a couple of areas. Build, right? The ability to deploy smart contracts, build your applications, et cetera. Operate and govern is probably the area where I think we take the least credit for what's actually been in the platform for a couple of years. We have a very nice tooling around building and deploying nodes, setting up your policies for who's going to deploy smart contracts, who's going to validate them, who are going to be members of the various ledgers, rules for updating nodes on the network, the integrated workflow, right, for multi-party signature. All of that is actually a big part of our operational and governance tooling. And the final part is really on the grow, right? How do I add? Hopefully everything is successful. How do we start adding either more capacity, more size to our nodes, or even just more members, right? So that's really the kind of key to the values in there, and you can stop by and see a demonstration of this in the booth. And finally, a couple of exciting things. Some are, look, I'm a technologist, so some are long due, right? One of the criticisms we always had against the platform was we only run it on the IBM cloud, right? Clearly, Hyperledger Fabric, it's software written in Go. It can run anywhere, right? You'll see in our latest offerings, not only do we have a cloud offering, same cloud offering, we are now packaging up a distributed version of this for any cloud platform you want to run on, right, from a software perspective. So it's available via us. I did mention our competitors have this as well, but this is important, right? So now you don't have to just rely on the IBM cloud for running the software, but you could still have IBM support and run this on like Azure or in your own data center or on OpenShift, which is critical, right? And I think when you start looking at networks that are out there or your customers, you should actually spread the wealth, right? You don't actually want all your nodes running on a single cloud, even if it's across multiple companies. So that's key. And then finally, we talked about performance and expertise in Eileen's sting. The last piece is a lot of tools, right? One of the newest things, and please do stop by and check this out. I think there's also sessions at Construct, whatever, on this as well. We've built a great set of tools for developing smart contracts and building the applications around that, right? Again, all in open source and a plug into Visual Studio code actually for this. So I will pass this on to Adam, who will talk about how we're using some of this stuff in solutions.
All right. Thank you, Gary. All right. So we're going to try to get a little bit interactive here, so just screen some stuff out. But first I have a question for the room. How do you know that I'm Adam? Anybody? I don't. He does not. We do not. How would you find out? How would you know that I'm Adam? Ask a trusted party. Ask somebody else. Right? You're not going to take my word for it. I could write Barry on there, whatever. Biometrics, right? Different ideas. Right. Can I get a volunteer from the audience? I'm going to pick somebody. Don't be shy. All right, come on up. We can come down here. People can see us, right? All right.
Make it more fair.
There we go. All right, so it says Daniel there.
Yeah.
Prove to me that you're Daniel.
I could show you government-issued ID.
Okay.
That'd be my best attempt.
Right, so the first thing, now stop for a second. I want to respect your privacy. I want to look at his ID. But we know how to do identity in the physical world, right? You have a wallet, it's yours. In it contains credentials that different parties provided you. In this case, the government issued you something. It's got a photo, it's got your name. And if you want to hand that to me, I'm going to try to maybe see if it's real. But you're giving me permission to that data, and I'm going to determine, yes, you are Daniel or you are not. Right? We know how to do that. Now, if I was a bank and you were applying for a loan, what may you give me?
A second form of ID.
Second form of ID, maybe a birth certificate, maybe a bank statement. But again, you're in control, you're giving that to me. Right, now sit back down, but we're not done yet. We're not done yet. So now pretend that Daniel did not go back to his seat. Where are you from?
Florida.
Florida, but he went back to Florida. And I'm sitting here, and now there's internet space between us. So now you're on the internet, I'm on the internet. Prove to me that you're Daniel.
I would probably try to send you pictures of the same government-issued ID.
Okay, pictures of an ID. But would I trust that? I'm not even very good at Photoshop. I think I could probably do something there. What else could you do?
I would try to find somebody that was mutually shared in our network and ask them to vouch for me.
Okay, maybe somebody to vouch for you. That's a good point. So let's look at first. Let's clap for Daniel. It's hard to be brave on a Monday morning, right? But notice how, and if you guys were thinking, right, once we get digital, we don't have a clue how to do identity. So what's happened is people go and they collect our information, and they'll issue you normally a username and a password. And we use that to access that. But now our information is being collected by these parties. Suddenly people realized, wow, I can do all sorts of stuff with this without anybody knowing. And then we have Cambridge Analytica and other scandals, right? These honeypots of data. Identity is so broken, there's so many problems. We're always reliant on somebody else to do that for us. But let's go back to the physical world when it came up. We know how to do identity. I have a wallet, I have information that people issued me, I give that to people, they trust me. We can't do that today digitally. So that's where blockchain comes in, and it's as simple as that. What if instead there was a decentralized ledger that was publicly accessible, that when the government issues you that identity, as part of that encryption, they sign it with their public key, and that's referenceable on a blockchain. We can now access and check and cryptographically prove that, yes, that's a digital driver's license without relying on a third party. We can get back to the way the physical world works and do it digitally. So that's really what we've been focused on in IBM, is helping to enable what is called decentralized identity. There's a lot of great and goodness that I can't go into in just 10 minutes. But if you come down to the booth, we actually have a demo where you can see this new digital experience, where I can take a wallet, I have credentials, I can permission it to somebody else, that's key, right? I'm taking back control of my identity. I can control what I want to share. I saw that hesitation there for a second when I asked for your driver's license of, do I want to show this to Adam? Right? We have that permissioning in the physical world. Why should we lose that in the digital world? It's our data. We get to control that. But to do that, there's a lot of work that has to happen. So first, there's a lot of boring plumbing that has to happen. Right? IBM happens to be a company that loves to do boring plumbing. It's interesting to us. We have a global cloud. We operate a global blockchain network. And there's all different models of identity. We work a lot with Hyperledger Indy, Hyperledger Fabric, but there's other things out there as well, to number one, help create this blockchain layer where we can do things like digital rights management, store keys, store proofs, and make that happen. The second thing that's key, and I see a very diverse audience, I'd imagine we have people from all over the globe. There's no one identity model that's going to work everywhere. I spent time last year in Thailand, in Europe, in North America. Different conversations. Similar themes, but different conversations. So one thing that's key to everything that we do is open standards. So we've been working with groups like the Decentralized Identity Foundation, along with Microsoft and a whole bunch of others around identity standards. So that way, in a global economy, people can move throughout the globe and are able to interact with various businesses and various governments and various people, even peer-to-peer. So to do that, it can get complicated. Right? Nobody wants to have a PhD in blockchain to be able to just very simply verify somebody's identity or help exchange information. And that's where we can help as well. So we've been working with a number of groups, Sovereign Foundation, SecureKey, and others, around helping these networks establish standards, and then building out a platform layer to make it very easy. So a developer in under 15 minutes with no prerequisite knowledge can get the cloud layer that they need to start issuing credentials or verify credentials, and SDKs to help make that easy as well. So you want to come check that out, the booth, and I think Eileen even had some times where we're going to be doing some identity stuff. And then the third area, and this is honestly what got me excited about this space, is what we can do to innovate. This really becomes the new permissioned way to get data. So let's think about a healthcare situation. Right? Imagine now, okay, people are issuing me my medical records that I can access in my digital wallet. What if I'm on vacation somewhere and I get hurt and I have to go to the emergency room? What's the first thing they're going to do? What's your medical history? Anybody know their medical history? Anybody? I don't have a clue. They ask me, I even go to my doctor, and I'm like, you know more about it than me, and it's in 30 different places. The power of being able to push a button and permission that to a medical provider is huge. Now imagine if we can start to then apply AI to that. Right? Let's put Watson Oncology against this new corpus of data. Right? What cures for diseases that we haven't discovered can we start to find? So we've been working across many industry lines. For those of you who were here last year at Consensus, we showed off some work with our Watson Financial Services team around how we can take this data and integrate it into a KYC workflow. There's lots of power of innovation. And if you come and stop by the booth, we can show off some of what we're doing as well. These are just some of the use cases we've been working on in the last year with clients. We've got a number of blogs. If you go out to ibm.com/blockchain/identity, you can read about a lot of these client use cases. This stuff is real. People are doing it now. It's a movement. I encourage you to get involved and stop by the booth, and we can help get you into the ecosystem. All right, hand it over to Nitin.
Thank you, Adam. That was very animated. My name is Nitin. I work with Digital Asset Labs in IBM. Questions, since we're asking questions, how many of you are from banks? That's interesting. How many of you are non-banking financial institutions? So we've been talking about blockchain and payments for the longest time, right? We've been talking about, and the whole genesis of Bitcoin led to figuring out as to how do we move money? How do we, if we aspire to create network of value, which essentially moves value around, how do we address the quintessential last mile problem of moving money, payments? So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with solutions, which is what Jerry mentioned earlier, which is World Wire, the ability for us to be able to address cross-border payments. But it's not new, is it? We've been dealing with the issues around cross-border movement of money in various different ways. There's whole issue with the whole ecosystem is laden with cost, lack of transparency, opacity of information, opacity of data, leading to the cost eventually that's passed on to the clients or to the end customer and fraud. So in this case, with World Wire, we try to do a few things, not just vanilla payments, but looking into addressing meaningful adoption of blockchain. And we learned a whole lot, and I'll share some of those nuggets of learnings with you in a few minutes, but be able to address not just the messaging piece, which is what Swift and Ripple have attempted to do, is be able to ensure that you have the right participants on a network, all the things that Jerry and Gary talked about as we build out this technical infrastructure, is be able to have the right participants, move the messaging between the entities, and be able to speed up and address the issue of time and trust that payment networks are oftentimes plagued with. But what's interesting to us is not just moving money. If we aspire to essentially build this value network, we have to address duality of a transactions. So you've seen demos, you've talked about movement of maybe partial securities, movement of mortgage-backed securities, movement of mortgages on blockchain network. But what we haven't addressed to the other end of the equation is movement of money. And I think what we've learned in this whole thing is differentiating us from just creating a messaging network to creating a model where we can actually address the settlement piece, which is oftentimes the last mile problem that we talk about, ability for us to actually move money. And in absence of the notion of CBDC, which is central bank issued digital currency, and those movements are happening across the globe if you're kept up with the information, we're trying to ensure that we are introducing what we call a stablecoin ecosystem to differentiate and say we're not just messaging providers, but we're also addressing the notion of tokenizing fiat. So last year, I wrote this long post on what do we need to do to make blockchain successful, and one of them, in addition to governance, security, scalability, all the things that Gary talked about, was around moving money, moving fiat. And this becomes a good interim measure for us to be able to tokenize money, tokenize fiat, to be able to address a business challenge of settlement, right? So a few things we've learned, and I think, how many of you are technical in the room? Most of us technical folks have become economists in the past 2 or 3 years, working with incentive economics, working with figuring out who has what stake in the network. And so, oops, we're back. I almost fell off my chair talking about the topic. But the whole thing around that is that we want to be able to address the topic of scalability as well as the topic of business transactions as we addressed with stablecoin. So how do we define stablecoin in blockchain networks? And I think in many cases, we want to be able to address stablecoin for the entities, technology agnostic concept, which means that the notion of stablecoin should be able to be addressed in a form of the fact that we should be able to build a network which is technology agnostic. We should be able to build a network that allows for the right business models and right participants to be able to join the network and be able to participate in it. So in many cases, what we've seen with World Wire, what we've learned with World Wire are a few things. One is messaging is not enough. we do have to address this from tokenizing fiat as we're tokenizing assets. Second thing we've learned is that this debate between private permission. I think what we were able to do with World Wire is we were able to create a fenced-off network in a public network, which allows us to be able to provide privacy, confidentiality, and many of such topics, which oftentimes have been a topic of technical debate when it comes to permission versus private networks. And in many cases, you find that blockchain networks are not just networks to move assets, are not just networks to be able to move value between two parties. This is actually a marketplace of sorts. You are trying to create various interaction between multiple parties. And so by creating a payment network, we begin to see interest from various different constituents who are not just involved in payments, which is, again, banks, non-banking financial institutions, MTOs, but also entities who want to be able to address the payment challenge. So no longer we are dealing with just creating digital obligations or cash obligations or creating SWIFT confirmation codes, but how do we be able to ensure that you have a duality of a transaction, that if I'm moving trade assets or goods on one network, the ability for me to be able to have a corresponding movement of money on a different network, thereby addressing the duality of that particular transaction that's happening in two different networks. I think that's a really important point, which what we've learned over time is that most blockchain networks are very business specific, and likewise, World Wire is addressing payment-specific flows as well. So with that, I would spend some time on this. I spent about 8 months, our team has spent time in terms of what is the business value. And like I said, most of our technical blockchain people have become economists over time. We've spent time in understanding what are the new business models. Why would somebody want to join a blockchain network? Why would somebody want to be able to issue a stable coin? What is the business model behind it? Because there is a cost of money. There is a cost of capital. There is a cost of element of you tying up your capital. So why would a bank, non-banking financial institutions, or any entity on the network that's issuing a stable coin do it, right? So we came up with this model, and this is an important part which sort of takes a tangent from our normal technical conversation of scalability, security, permission versus private, to take the conversation to the business level to be able to understand as to what are the business models that are evolving, what are the new business model that needs to be consumed for this to really work, right? So hopefully, again, 10 minutes is too short a time, but I just want to give you a taste of what we're trying to build, which is meaningful use of technology to address real core business problems. With that, I'd like to take a pause and give it back to Jerry for any Q&A. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, team. I think that was a whirlwind through the three pillars. So just to summarize, Eileen talked about our services business, 500 plus and growing from the likes of Cineverse and MediaOcean and WeTrade and many of the ones that Eileen talked about, is really informing our work on the platform and keeping us grounded in building a permission blockchain to be able to manage many of the regulated workflows that happen within these industries: telco, media and entertainment, financial services, driving the qualities. And as Gary said, you don't want to spend all of your time in the inner sanctum of the tech. You want to solve your business problem and get your business value. So go to a platform to solve the problem. It's when you look at the time versus the money that you would spend on the platform versus the time you would lose focus on actually standing up the environment yourself, it's a good bet to go this way. And it's running everywhere and anywhere. And then, of course, that's one set of influences. But then, you got to really walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk. So we're not just advising customers on how to build solutions and watching them as they run solutions on their own, but we're also building blockchain networks to help inform us to how to better inform customers and better provision the platform. So it's a linked value system between the three pillars of our strategy, and I think very fortunate right up to the top. I see Marie Week sitting in the back there, our fearless leader of the three pillars, that we in IBM can deliver these services for you. So which Avenger are we? I don't know. That's your call. But in this Marvel universe that we've created around blockchain, we are glad to be in it with you. And let me open up at this point for a set of questions. And I will ask you, we have a fun teaser at the very end. I said you can't and I think I'm channeling Marie when I say this, you can't get fit by reading books on fitness. We have a book on blockchain that we have 50 copies of that 2 of the 3 authors, Nitin and I, are here. So after this, we're going to do a signing at the IBM booth 101. There it is. And we're going to sign the first 50 copies. But with that said, questions?
Real quick, are you issuing a stablecoin?
Yeah, so we're not. We are.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question is, are we issuing stablecoin? And the answer is no, because we are a tech company. We build a network. We're facilitating a network for the various participants to join the network. So we are soliciting banks, financial institutions, many startup companies like Stronghold, for example, and there are 34 stablecoin issuers in the world. And the idea is to have as diverse and as many players as you can, because that makes the network more attractive. So IBM is not. We're not a bank.
Hello. With blockchain and encryption, you need encryption keys. As an enterprise customer, we have to keep our keys on-prem. We can put the data that's encrypted in the cloud, but the keys themselves must stay on-prem. How do you address that solution?
Gary?
Sure, I can take that. I think there's, so the question, can everybody hear the question? The question was about basically more or less, let's say key management and keeping them on-prem. So I think there's 2 parts to that. One is the nodes, there's the client keys themselves, right, for actually submitting or whatever, submitting the transactions themselves. And in some cases, depending on the blockchain frameworks, most permission ones, a lot of the nodes themselves are going to sign as well, right? Clearly, from a client transaction perspective, you can always have those, the keys themselves can always be on-prem, right? You can have a remote client and still communicate with a network that's running in the cloud or running on somebody else's premise. On the side of like nodes themselves, I can say specifically the Fabric, where our nodes all sign things. You can, of course, have the option of running it within your own data center. The other side of it is a lot of people are going with, one of the things that we did on the Fabric side, on the security side, was support for things like PKCS11 and HSMs. So you can actually at least go, most cloud vendors today have HSMs that people are willing to trust, where you provision the keys yourself into those HSMs, and we don't have access to them.
I tell you what, since the group wants to kind of cycle in for the next one, we'll take one more question and then move it down to our IBM booth, and we'll all be there. Some of us signing books, the others answering questions and signing books. Yes?
This is a bit specific technical question. So I'm using the IBM Blockchain platform. I think it supports Fabric 1.2, 1.3. Is there any plan for releasing 1.4 for production use? Since this is specific, I can come to the booth and ask later.
Yeah, we are in beta with our version 2 of our platform, which supports 1.4.
All right.
Which is out there right now. You can try it today.
Any timelines for the production?
What?
Any timelines for any improvement?
Any day now. Any day now.
That's good to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm walking over to the booth. You can follow me.